Star Wars was released in 1977. It was directed by George Lucas and stars Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher. The film is a classic sci-fi that takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Within this galaxy, there is a teenager named Luke Skywalker who lives on a desert planet known as Tatooine. And he's that everyday teenager who just wants more in life. He's very, very bored with his life. All of his other friends have pretty much gone out onto other planets and done other things, and he's pretty much just alone by himself with his aunt and uncle. Eventually, his life is turned completely upside down as he goes on this big, massive, epic space adventure as he gets involved in a massive war between rebels, Jedi, the dark side, the Empire, and a big massive fight over these plans for a big weapon known as the Death Star. A weapon that is capable of blowing up an entire planet. A weapon so awesome that it just happens to be on this shirt that I'm wearing. As a lot of you guys may know, Star Wars is one of the most iconic films of all time. When I think of classic movies, or really, really great movies, or movies that are loved pretty much universally, Star Wars is one of the first movies I think of. Now, there are quite a few reasons as to why I've decided that I wanted to review Star Wars. Well, for starters, I don't think I really need an excuse to talk about Star Wars, do I? The first reason is because today is officially the 40th anniversary of this movie. So, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, I thought, what better way to respect Star Wars than by reviewing it? Not only did I want to review Star Wars in celebration of the 40th anniversary, however, I also plan on marathoning all 7 Star Wars movies in anticipation for Episode 8, The Last Jedi, coming out this December. So leading up to The Last Jedi coming out at the end of this year, I will be releasing a review of each Star Wars movie once a month in order of release, not by episode. So I've got my Star Wars shirt, my 3 lightsabers from the original trilogy, I've got all 7 movies on Blu-ray, and I'm ready to talk about these movies, starting with Star Wars. The first thing I have to say about Star Wars is the fact that this movie is a ton of fun. And that is one of the best things I can say about this movie. This is one of the most entertaining movies I've ever seen in my life. It's just full of life and fun and adventure. And in my opinion, the only other movie I can think of that is as entertaining or fun to watch as Star Wars are other movies like Back to the Future. That's its only real competition in my opinion. This is also a very well shot movie. The very first shot of the movie is a clear example of how threatening and powerful the Empire has become. Or the scene where we see Darth Vader for the very first time. This entry has no dialogue, and just with the cinematography and the set design and the way this overall scene is staged, with no dialogue, you can instantly tell that this is the main villain and he is extremely powerful. He just has this real great threatening presence, and honestly, I think Darth Vader's entrance in Star Wars might be one of my favorite villain entrances in any movie ever. One thing I found very amusing about this movie is its sense of scale. If you watched a movie and you sort of go in with a mindset and pretend you've never seen it before and just watch the movie play out, and watching the movie from that circumstance, your information on this overall world and universe and story is very limited because the first 20 minutes is told almost entirely from the perspective of the 2 droids, C-3PO and R2-D2. Through the presence of what's sort of going on in the scene around them, you can tell there's simply a much bigger story to be told. However, you don't really get that much information about it, and overall, it just feels like that Star Wars is a very, very small movie. But as the film progresses, we travel to new locations, we meet more characters, and we get more info on the overall world, story, and characters and locations, and by the time we get to the climax of this 1-2-hour movie, we already feel like that we are one small part of a gigantic universe. And I love how the movie is really able to set up this great big universe very gradually, over just 2 hours. And it's very unique to me because I haven't really seen any other movies that feels and comes off as a small movie at first, but gradually feels much, much bigger as the film progresses. I haven't really seen any films like that. Movies like Lord of the Rings are really big films right from the start, and they remain that big all the way to the very end. Movies like Cube feels like very, very small claustrophobic movies right from the start, and feels the exact way till the very end. Star Wars is the only time where it feels like its sense of scale really seems to grow throughout the film. Also, this movie is incredibly iconic and very, very memorable. Many fans have pretty much memorized the entire movie, scene by scene, line by line. Every scene is memorable, and every scene feels important. And since every scene feels so important and memorable, it causes the movie to feel a lot shorter than it actually is. The movie is 2 hours long, but it only feels like 40 minutes. Not to mention the fact that the movie is filled to the brim with very, very entertaining sequences. Every character is extremely memorable with bright and colourful personalities. And a lot of the main characters have their own individual character arcs, especially Luke and Han. Luke is an awesome protagonist, he's extremely likeable. I love Mark Hamill's performance in this movie, along with the rest of the original trilogy. I don't exactly count Mark Hamill in Force Awakens, since in that movie he just stands on the edge of a cliff and takes off a hood and has no lines. But I love his performance in the original trilogy, and I cannot wait to see more of Mark Hamill in Episode 8. He also has a great development. He grows from being someone who just complains and just wants to get off Tatooine to being someone who is very loyal, and all he wants to do is just learn how to be a Jedi so he can help contribute to saving the galaxy. He's flawed, but he's also very, very likable and relatable. And then there's one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise, Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford. I love this guy! I also love his character arc, which in a lot of ways is actually a much bigger character arc than Luke's. He starts off helping out with the whole situation and conflict of the movie, but he's only doing it for his own selfish reasons. However, he gradually starts to see the urgency of the situation and eventually starts helping out for the sake of helping out. And he slowly gets more mature, but he doesn't completely transform and completely does a 180 within a couple of scenes. He slowly grows more mature. However, he doesn't completely 180 as a character. You can definitely still see hints of the old Han Solo by the end of the film. And I know everyone and his brother says this, but since I'm on the subject of Han Solo, yes! Han shot first.
Yes, I bet you have.
I also really love his co-pilot slash Wookiee, Chewbacca. Very entertaining and a very funny character. Darth Vader is awesome as a villain. He has this great, evil, threatening presence, and you know how powerful this guy is. Not to mention, his voice and appearance has become borderline iconic. I love his suit, I love his mask, I love his voice, I love that breathing sound effect that's become iconic. The banter between C-3PO and R2-D2 is hilarious. Even though we don't always understand what R2 is saying, I love how C-3PO finds really creative ways of translating what he's saying. Same applies to Han Solo and Chewbacca. But the relationship between C-3PO and R2-D2 are responsible for some of the funniest scenes in the movie. Characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi is very wise, but he's also very lovable. Princess Leia is another one of many great characters in this film. One thing I particularly love about Princess Leia in this movie is that she is not your stereotypical damsel in distress. She is miles better than other characters like Princess Peach or Princess Elise. Yes, she does get kidnapped by a stormtrooper, but when she's eventually she was captured by a stormtrooper. A stormtrooper successfully captured Princess Leia. That's hilarious. Doesn't anyone else find that really funny, considering what people say about these guys? All jokes aside, when Princess Leia is eventually rescued by Luke, she pretty much takes control of the situation. She starts using and firing a gun, she starts yelling orders of ways to get out of the situation. She really contributes to the plot. And as much as she contributes to the plot in this film, she contributes to the plot even more in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And she also has a great personality. A lot of characters that are damsel in distresses in movies and video games are really just blank slates and they have little to no personality. This does not apply to Princess Leia. In fact, she's got a really serious attitude. She is kind-hearted and caring, but she also does have a bit of a temper on her hands. If you do something that annoys her, she will snap at you. But despite the fact that she does have a bit of an edge to her character, she's overall still a very, very likable character. And a lot of it comes down to partially the writing, but most of it comes down to Carrie Fisher's excellent performance. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. You will be missed. Also, yeah, the stormtroopers. I really have grown to really like their suits and their helmets and everything. I know they look kind of silly, and I know they don't look as threatening as the other villains in this universe. The fact that they're actually people in costumes on set really gives it a much more lively feeling than the really cardboard cutout CGI clones that we get in the prequels. But at the same time, the stormtroopers are also pretty laughable, with many made fun of instances, like how easily they fall over, or smacking their heads on doors. Seriously, that one shot of the stormtrooper smacking its head on the door, I don't think any Star Wars fan is ever going to let that scene go. Or how they are constantly falling over.
Everybody do the flop!
Or how they really can't hit anything, they only hit their target once or twice throughout the entire trilogy. And I mean, they are really, really pathetic at shooting. I mean, look at this shot of C-3PO and R2-D2 walking across the hallway of blasters, shooting left and right in all directions, constantly darting back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, going absolutely everywhere. And despite the fact that blaster lasers are flying everywhere, and they're walking across a hallway right in the middle of the whole thing, neither of them get hit once. I really have to suspend my disbelief with that shot. It's just, I don't buy it. They should have gotten hit. But you know something I think is really, really funny about these guys? Take everything I just said to account about how pathetic these guys are, and listen to what Obi-Wan Kenobi says and how he describes a stormtrooper.
Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
I just think that line is funny just because of how untrue that is. Another thing I really appreciate about this movie is that despite the fact that it's got a PG rating, it is not afraid to go into dark places. For a PG rating, there is some really, really disturbing imagery. Like the scene where we see the rotting corpses of Luke's aunt and uncle. That is actually really, really horrific for a PG. Another thing that I love about this movie is that there are just little touching tidbits of extra stories and backstories. It feels like that there's a lot more to this world and universe than this movie is letting on. Now yes, this is obviously true due to how much of the expanded universe and how many sequels and spin-offs that this series has gotten, but if you just ignore all of that and just look at this film as a standalone film, you can tell that this movie is still hinting at all of this stuff. Like, it's just touching, like there's a lot more to this world and this story than just the one we're exploring. And it isn't until we get sequels and spin-offs and video games and novels and the expanded universe that really goes into more in-depth about these extra stories that this one movie is hinting on. Also, this movie is visually fantastic. All the shots are very, very well composed, and I love the practical effects in this movie, like the practical costumes, the actual real-life sets, and the work on the puppets. The puppets are phenomenal, and they still hold up to this day. I love the set design, and a lot of the effects that happen in camera still hold up to this day. And this movie looks absolutely gorgeous on Blu-ray. And among that, there's also some really, really fun, entertaining action sequences. Especially when we get to the second half of the movie. The first half of the movie is very slow and dialogue driven, and a lot of scenes allows you to really sink in the moment. Like Luke Skywalker stands outside of his house on Tatooine when the suns are setting, and he just stares at the two suns thinking about his potential future, with John Williams' amazing score. Such a beautiful moment, one of my favourite scenes in the movie. Scenes like that really allows you to just absorb this world and universe and really allows you to sink in the moment. But then once we get to the second half of the movie with the stuff with the Death Star, then it's non-stop action, and it's a ton of fun. Action sequences like all the chases that we have on the Millennium Falcon, or the scene with the blasters in the hallway, or what we get right after it, the scene with the trash compactor, or the very first lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. And my personal favourite action sequence, the climax. The fight with the X-Wings on the surface of the Death Star within that little trench area is one of my favourite action sequences in film history. It's cinematic gold. I love it. I know a lot of people complain about the weakness of the Death Star, how there's this little hole thing that goes directly into the center of the Death Star, but I think that this complaint is unwarranted because this thing can't be invincible. There has to be some weakness, otherwise how the hell are they supposed to destroy this thing? And even if you remove Rogue One from the equation, there's still many plausible explanations that do a great job at debunking this problem. My only real problem with this scene is really the fact we don't really know any of the characters within the fight except for Luke Skywalker himself, and so when the other characters die off one by one throughout this action sequence, I don't really feel anything because I don't know these characters. And I know in the special edition they added one very brief scene between Luke and Biggs, but in my opinion, that's not enough for me to get invested in this character, so I don't really feel anything when the other characters die. But Death Star aside, this movie is also responsible for what I would consider one of the coolest props of all time, the lightsaber. I love this thing. Actually, I don't know anyone who doesn't love the concept of a lightsaber. Admit it, if you're a Star Wars fan, there has at least been one moment when you wished for either a real lightsaber or just a replica. I mean, I've got replicas of lightsabers myself, and I love the concept of lightsaber dueling. The lightsaber is my favourite movie prop of all time. In my opinion, its only real competition is the DeLorean from Back to the Future. But there was actually one really risky move involving the lightsaber in this movie, and that is the fact that Luke Skywalker is given a lightsaber, but excluding the scene when it's first given to him, and the scene later on where he's training with it, these are the only two scenes we see Luke Skywalker holding a lightsaber in this movie. Yes, we do have a lightsaber dueling scene, but that's between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. There isn't a scene in this movie where Luke Skywalker finally comes face to face with Darth Vader himself. Yes, Darth Vader does face Luke Skywalker in a way during the Death Star sequence, but there really isn't a big face-off moment until the climax of Empire Strikes Back, which was a very risky move considering a lot of people thought that this movie was a failure, so the chances of this movie getting a sequel when it was first being released in cinemas were very, very slim, and yet they still managed to avoid doing that, which I think was a very, very risky move, but it definitely paid off because we eventually got that awesome scene in the end of Empire Strikes Back. John Williams' score is phenomenal, and this is one of my favourite movie soundtracks of all time because unlike a lot of other movie soundtracks, this is one of the few movies where a large majority of the music in the film is very memorable to me. It's not just the main opening theme that plays with the crawl that has also become extremely iconic. There's that peaceful music with that moment on Tatooine that I mentioned earlier. There is that big fun epic battle music that plays every so often. And of course, the main theme. One thing I love about this movie is just the way it opens. We don't get any credits or real names until the very end of the movie, but it just sucks you in with that phrase, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, and then boom! John Williams' score punches you right in the face with that big, epic, fun, exhilarating score with the text Star Wars, and the credits we do get is essentially a short prologue that summarizes the context of what we're about to see. This is a genius opening because it sucks me in immediately, and it always gets me hyped up and excited to watch it every single time I pop this movie in. Like many others, I love this movie, but unfortunately I cannot say I have seen the original theatrical 1977 cut of the film, and the reason why I say that is because of one major problem that many Star Wars fans, myself included, complain about. The special edition edits. I love this Blu-ray set. I am so glad I got it. I absolutely love it. It's phenomenal, and this movie looks gorgeous on my Blu-ray, and I love almost everything about it. But my only real problem is the fact that you can't buy the theatrical cuts on DVD or Blu-ray. Well, you can get the theatrical cuts on DVD, but they're very, very low quality. And my problem with the special edition is really the same problem that everyone else has. There are many, many changes that in my opinion hurts the theatrical cut, like Greedo shooting first, or an additional scene with Jabba the Hutt that pretty much repeats everything that was just said in the previous scene, and the addition of lots of CGI stuff that just doesn't need to be there. But since I really want to see the theatrical cuts and better own them, I am very, very interested in something that a lot of you Star Wars fans may or may not have heard of, the despecialized edition, which is a big project that a lot of really hardcore Star Wars fans went out of their way from, and using a wide variety of resources, they were able to pretty much recreate the original theatrical cut of each Star Wars movie in the original trilogy, only just simply updated to HD. It's a long, complicated process, but I would love to see HD versions of the original trilogy with the special edition edits removed. And so if I do get my hands on the despecialized edition, I will definitely make a video on it. Outside of the special edition, are there any other flaws I have with this movie? Well, yeah, they are very, very minor flaws, but there are one or two minor nitpicks I do have with this movie. Again, there is the special edition and the unbelievable moments and how the stormtroopers are a joke, but there are a couple of other legit flaws I have. A few of the effects are slightly dated. For example, when Luke Skywalker first turns on the lightsaber, it looks very, very two-dimensional, like this cardboard effect, and even the special editions have this problem. And the first 20 minutes, while good and interesting and fun and entertaining, but in my honest opinion, the first 20 minutes or so are a little slow. But the film definitely picks up in pace when we're introduced to Luke Skywalker. But as a whole, Star Wars has stood the test of time remarkably well. During production, everything went wrong. Lots of people were throwing advice of George Lucas of many things that he was doing wrong, and so a lot of people were bossing the director around. Cast and crew members were not taking their role seriously and making jokes behind the scenes on set. Sets weren't working, costumes weren't working, effects weren't working. The making of the film behind the scenes was a complete disaster. And yet, despite all of those massive limitations, Star Wars has become one of the most iconic and recognizable film franchises of all time. At every single standpoint, this movie holds up amazingly well. To an effects standpoint, to a film standpoint, with its story, its characters, and everything. It's one of the few films that, regardless if you're into film or not, it's one of the few movies I would recommend everybody sees at least once in their lives. The thing I love the most about this movie is just that it has a real soul and spirit and presence to it that really gives it this great sense of fun and adventure. And all good Star Wars movies, in my opinion, has this spirit. There's just so much love and passion and charisma and energy and adventure gone into these movies. You all know this is coming, this is obvious, but Star Wars gets an A+. Thank you all for watching. I absolutely had a blast talking about the original Star Wars with you. Stay tuned for my review for Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I cannot wait to talk about that one. But until then, yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers.